I have a talk coming up. I'm going to be in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia this weekend. And
Philly?
Yeah, Philly. So one of the things, as I'm going through the research and putting together the slides, one of the things that I am seeing that I think would be interesting to discuss, and I wanted to sort of just spend a few minutes talking about it on the program, I'm looking at identity development, like how people develop identities. And there are a few different types of identity that people can fall into categories, and one of the identities that is most interesting to me is the foreclosed identity, because to me that is what really sums up an indoctrinated personality. And then you have an achieved identity, which is a person who has pretty much developed a unified healthy identity, and they're going forward with that. And there are other types of identity. There's a diffuse identity, moratorium identity. These are people that are in different stages of development of an identity or not developing an identity. And there was some discussion regarding what goes into it. And so the charts, when you look at the identity charts, they have on one axis something that would be like the amount of research or effort or energy that you're putting into looking into the things that you believe. And then the other side of that would be the level of commitment that you have. So a foreclosed identity, or the one that I'm associating most with what we would call an indoctrination, is a person who has not really put in a lot of research into what they believe, but they're very committed to what they believe. So they're highly committed to this belief, but they really are laboring under a lot of misconceptions, generally due to not having investigated thoroughly what it is that they've accepted. And in the meantime, you have the moratorium is somebody who's searching, who may not feel really committed to particular beliefs in a strong way, but they're searching and they're looking and trying to maybe decide, what do I want to do for a living? What do I believe about religion? What do I want to do as far as family? Do I want children? Do I want to get married? Am I straight? Am I gay? Like these are the types of things that a person would be searching as they're trying to figure out, who am I and what does that mean? And so a person in moratorium is actually putting in effort to look into these things to try and say, where would I commit? Where do I want to commit? Diffuse personalities, diffuse identities would be people who aren't really looking and aren't really committed. So when you think in terms of like a slacker personality, that's kind of what that is. And it's very highly tied to a lot of personality disorders. And when it comes to the foreclosed identity, which is the one that has a high level of commitment and a low level of investigation into those commitments, and then you have the achieved, which is a high level of commitment, ironically not as high as the foreclosed, right? So a person that hasn't looked into it, that is foreclosed, is usually got a higher level of commitment than the person who's actually looked into it. And part of the reason for that is that people begin to understand when they look into a belief that there are lots of different sides. Like the more you investigate, the more you start to see the shades of gray. Even though you might come to a conclusion about it and you might say, this is my belief, you still understand that there's a lot of information out there, and so I really need to be open to something that might come along that could adjust my opinion later. So you're not nearly as committed as some of the people in the foreclosed category.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I'm not sure, I guess it would just be me, but there was something that says like it's a graph and it has your level of confidence in the subject versus your time studying. So it was referencing a specific profession like physics. And so on the low end, where it was a low level of experience or study behind it, your confidence was very high.
I am so good at physics.
The highest on the map, but then as the study went up, then it dropped precipitously and then started growing very gradually. But it never got as high as it was at the start of that graph when there was a low level of study.
Because you don't know what you don't know.
And
when you start to learn what you don't know, you start saying, wait a minute, maybe I don't know what I thought I knew. But anyway, there are some other models that go into this, and some of those models have to do with children and how children develop identity, because most of the identity development is happening around adolescence. But children can incorporate views and beliefs that are other people's views and beliefs through a process called introjection, where you literally pick up on how someone else thinks about you, and you could be wrong about it. It doesn't mean that you're right. It's just your opinion of what someone else thinks, and you adopt that into yourself. And for an adult, or for somebody with a strong identity, or somebody who has well thought out beliefs, the idea of introjecting beliefs seems kind of weird. But when you think about it in terms of a 3 or 4-year-old who has a very limited life experience and who gets most of their information about what's okay and not okay from people merely reacting, right? I mean, that's how children, before they get older, learn about the world around them, is by seeing how other people react. If people react badly, then this is a thing you probably don't want to do. It's not okay. And if people react very positively, then, oh, this is a good thing. People like this. People appreciate this, and they react well to this. So for children, if they get a lot of negative reaction all the time from things that they're doing, this can start to affect their view of themselves, especially if it's verbalized in ways that put this negatively about the child's personality as opposed to an event. So telling a child, oops, you spilled, that was an accident, we have to be more careful, is a very different message than, you're so clumsy, why are you always dropping things? Right? One of them is a message about you. One of them is a message about this thing that you did. You can correct the thing you do, but if you're inherently clumsy or horrible, then you have a problem because that's you. And when you start to get into areas that deal with, for example, shame, being ashamed of yourself, you can really mess up somebody in a big way. So with that in mind, I found these videos, someone linked me to these videos, and I was very shocked at the way that they demonstrated this so well. This divide between the foreclosed personality, which is what I would consider an indoctrinated person, versus, I don't even know, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily an achieved. It's either an achieved or a moratorium. Certainly somebody that's open-minded and looking, right? So I can't really say what that is, but I can say with the one, it seems like a pretty strong indication that she's dealing with a foreclosed personality. And I want to show the clips, and I want to thank Cordial Curiosity, the YouTube channel. I want to thank them for giving me permission to edit these down a little bit and just run the portions of these that were applicable as best I can. And what I want you to be looking for is how open to information someone is, how willing to investigate, willing to hear more, willing to engage, willing to give their own opinions and say, here's what I think about it, and here's what you're telling me. There's other information, and yes, I would like to hear about that. It would be interesting. It may or may not change my mind. It probably won't, but I'd be open to hear it. And certainly a person that's more open like that, even when they say, I don't think it would change my mind, you kind of get the idea that if they were presented with something and it did affect that belief, that they probably would change their mind, because they're already saying, I want to hear more about this, and that would be interesting, and I can't really imagine it yet, and I don't think it would change my mind, but I'd want to hear it. So on the other hand, then you're going to see another video. And in this video, I want to kind of clarify, because I don't have a problem with somebody looking something up. If I ask you, for example, what do you think about this issue X? And you tell me, well, here's my opinion on it. I looked into it, and this is what I have developed as an opinion. This is my belief about it. And I ask you about that belief, and you say, well, there's this statistic that shows that there's a very high level of blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, at what level is it? Well, you might have to look that up, right? This is a specific fact. This isn't something that resides in your head as your opinion or your thought. You just remember that you read the information about it, there was this high level of something, and that affected your views on this. And if I ask you for the specific percentage, you may not have that at the tip of your brain. You might have to go and research it. And I get that. I'm not harshing on anybody for not having memorized every shred of information that went into forming a belief. We don't have, most of us anyway, photographic memories. So, but you still have like a basic idea where you can respond and give the narrative about, here's why I believe this thing. And when someone asks you your opinion, if they say, well, do you think that that's a good resource? Like that source where you got the data, is it a good source? And you say, well, yeah. I mean, I would hope that you would be able to answer regarding the confidence in that source and not just say, well, I read it in just some article, right? So when someone asks your opinion on it, like, do you think that's a good source for that type of data? You are going to give your opinion, even if you hadn't thought of that question before. Let's say that you did just read it in some article, you don't know anything about the source, and someone says, do you have reason to believe this is a good source? Well, your opinion then should be, well, no, actually I don't. I just read it and I really don't know anything about the source. That was just something I saw in this article. But I don't know anything about the publication that's putting this article out. I don't know who's behind it. So you should have some opinion about the source when someone asks you, what do you know about this source? Well, you either know something that gives you some confidence in them. Like, let's say that I've quoted from some newspaper and someone from another country is on Facebook and they say, is this a good source? I would say, like, well, yes, the New York Times is considered very reliable. Okay. As opposed to, oh, someone told you this from Fox News. Well, they tend to lean a little, in some directions, a little biased with the news there. And so you can give views on things like this that are your own opinions about it. And what we're going to see is that in one of these videos, even when it comes to not necessarily specific facts, but opinions, one of these people won't even give an opinion without wanting to refer to some notes that they got in order to answer. Like they don't want to really answer much when it gets into, well, why are you thinking this or why are you accepting this? They are not simply referring to notes for obscure facts or statistics. Mm-hmm. They are wanting to reference notes to give their views, which is very strange. When you see someone doing that, that should strike you as odd because you shouldn't have to go look up your opinions about things. Right. And so there's some real significant differences. And what's interesting to me is that both of these are Christians. One of them says that they're from a Baptist background. One is certainly from a Bible, literalist background. But they're both from conservative Christian backgrounds, and one of them is completely open and completely willing to talk and completely willing to investigate, and the other one is completely closed off. And so I want to go ahead and start with the one that is more open to investigation. If we could roll the clips on Dominic, that would be great.
I'd love to understand how you concluded that this is true, that God had something to do with this.
I mean, like I said, background being in Christianity, I'm not sure how we all came to be, like whether it's Adam and Eve and all that stuff. I just, some of that stuff just lacks factual and lacks logic, and I just don't try to get into that. I know that I'm a human being. I know that I'm a spiritual being. I know that I have capable of good and bad. I know that there's something in me that aspires a life greater than myself, as far as like my drive, my motivation, my ambition. Those things are like, where do we get those things from?
Where do we get our drive and motivation?
Where do we get those things that we like passion and like things that we care about? How we are, our personality, us, some people being more extroverted, introverted. Like, what is those? Who gives us those things? Yeah, I didn't select those things this is the kind of person I want to be.
So all these questions about how we came to be, how do we get these motivations and stuff. I'm not saying this is the case, but if someone could explain to us both that this stuff could happen without a God at all, would that change your confidence about the God existing?
I would be interested to hear that. Okay. But I'm open-minded. I like to hear things. I like to understand more. I would never say I would probably not sway from what I believe, but it just gives me a different perspective.
Okay. If you were somehow convinced that we don't survive our deaths at all, would that change your confidence about a God existing?
That'd be interesting to hear about.
Is there any evidence or facts for this belief?
It's faith.
Faith.
That's the crutch in Christianity. It's the faith element. People are like, oh, faith is just have faith, just hope, just believe. But faith can carry you a long way.
Yeah, how do you think someone without this belief could get meaning in life?
Because I just feel like, I don't know, if you believe, first of all, within yourself, you believe in your capabilities, that there's nothing wrong with that. You believe that all things happen for good, and there's nothing really wrong with that. It doesn't have to be God. It's just, if that's just your way of thinking, I think in all essence it's a great way to approach life. But me being fundamentally Christian, I believe God gives me that.
God gives you
the oxygen to do that.
Okay. But is this true?
A lot of people believe it.
Does the amount of people who believe something?
It doesn't. No, okay. Absolutely not. So that's an interesting perspective. So you believe that? Wow, I've never ever heard that before. You believe that what you believe in, if it can be challenged as not true, that makes you feel more confident in it?
Yeah, because beliefs that can't be shown to be false could be any belief.
That's very deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you just can't, right.
Yeah.
Because you can challenge and question God. That's okay.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how could we know if this belief was false?
I don't think there's no way to know, man.
There's no way to know.
So that makes you less confident in it.
It makes it not valuable for me. And the benefits I get from it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good
I would
perspective.
like to believe it if it's true.
Right, but
Yeah.
because nobody can question it, nobody can prove it. You can't prove faith. You can't prove any of these things. It's like, why am I believing this?
So, I mean, what's not to love about Dominic, right? I mean, this is a guy who is really open-minded.
Yeah, he really was.
Being open-minded and being, willing to question things, it doesn't mean that everything you believe is going to be correct. It just means you're willing, like he says, to hear more about it. When Dominic says, I'd be willing to hear more about that, there is not a shred of anything in me that thinks that's insincere. It's not defensive. Mm-hmm. He's completely open. He's very approachable, and he's allows other people to be, approach him. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I would like to have a look at Tia. So if we could go ahead and roll Tia's video.
It's asking me tough questions. I didn't even learn this in Bible class. Go to a Christian school, and I've taken a bunch of classes on theories and all these different things, and it just makes sense to me. It kind of like hits home, and I just have this feeling that it's really true.
And how did you determine that this was actually true?
Just all like the proof and the theories.
Okay, what's like the best example?
There's a lot actually. So, like the Babel Tower, they found it. They found where it was.
Gotcha. So you're saying it's just there's so much goodness to it, and it's really positive.
Mm-hmm.
How does the goodness or positivity of a belief relate to the truth of the belief, though?
I think it says it all in the Bible. Like, it's a tough question.
Just because the Bible says something, does that make it actually true?
In my belief, it does. Not everybody believes that just because it says it doesn't make it true. A lot of people are like, oh, well, since I didn't see it, it's not true. But I think just there's a lot of evidence to it, so just makes sense to me.
Just makes sense.
Like, people used to live for like 800 years back then, and a lot of people question that. But the reasoning was because God told them to go and multiply, but he wanted them to keep multiplying and multiplying. So the more the population increases, the less we live. We decrease in age.
Is there evidence for a God?
Mm-hmm.
What's the best one?
There's a lot. Like I said, there's a lot. I have to think, but you're putting me on the spot. It's hard. I have them written down, actually, in here.
Are feelings a reliable way to have confidence in a God like this?
I would say so.
Okay.
If you've ever worshipped, I mean, when I worship, you just get this joy that no one else can experience unless you get it. Like, it's just a joy. Mm-hmm. And joy is different than happiness.
Yeah.
Joy it's something that doesn't just go away. Happiness, like, can come and go, but joy is an internal thing.
If someone from another religion came up to the table and said
Mm-hmm.
that believing in their God gave them joy and that they have really good internal feelings about that God, is that a justifiable way to come to that belief just by going off feelings for that?
No. I would say that's awesome. I would say that's cool, but check out what I have to say.
Yeah.
Check out.
If it's not reliable for them,
Mm-hmm.
why was it reliable for yourself?
You're asking tough questions. You really are. You're doing good. It's not. I'm not saying it's reliable. It's not. But it's just what I believe personally, and I always will believe it. I just have a very strong faith towards it.
Is just believing or having faith in anything a reliable way to have confidence that something's true?
I think faith,
Why?
because it's. You're good at this.
I'm just very interested in
I know.
why people believe.
I need to get my book out. I have a book in here. Helps me out. I can't memorize all of it.
Well, is faith a reliable way to believe in anything?
Is faith a reliable way to believe in anything? I think it is, but I don't have a reason why. It's just what I believe.
Just what you believe.
It's just what I believe, and it's always going to be what I believe. I don't care if I don't have good reasoning.
Okay.
Wow.
That to me was like the best juxtaposed examples. I used two people that believe. They both ranked themselves as very confident that in their belief that a God exists at the beginning of those clips when you go watch the whole thing. And yet one of them is very open, and one of them gives his views. I mean, you get the idea, at least I do, when I watch Dominic, I get the idea that Dominic may have accepted some things without fully questioning them, but I don't get this feeling that he is indoctrinated, right? Dominic is willing to question, he's willing to challenge. We all of us, I don't think there's going to be anybody that you can find that doesn't believe some things that they haven't looked into sufficiently. I come up with stuff all the time where somebody will say a thing and then I start to give a fact that I think is a fact. And then I stop and I say, wow, I've never really looked that up. I'll go look it up and it's not what I thought. So I've even, anybody can internalize a thing that's not correct or not true and go along with that without really fully questioning it. And sometimes it's a minor thing, sometimes it can be a major thing. That's not really to me what it means to be indoctrinated. Indoctrinated is what we saw with Tia, where you can't even open your mouth without, where are my notes? I have to find my opinion that they gave me, right? This is a whole different level. And I kept two things in there. One was the age, the thing about people getting younger, dying younger.
Yeah, that was...
And the thing about the Babel Tower. Now, I cut that off, and at first I was kind of like, wait, why did I cut that off? Because he questions her about that further. The reason that I cut it off is I just wanted to show the aging information that she gives and also the Babel Tower information. Those would be very easy things to debunk. It would take her no time at all to look that up and investigate it and see that it's not true. Mm-hmm. So for Tia, what we're seeing is somebody who, you can tell she thinks she's investigating. She's talking about all this proof and all this evidence and all of these theories that she's studying and studying and studying. There's all this proof and evidence. But then she puts out this information that it's like 5 minutes on Google and you would have this debunked easily. Mm-hmm. Not even hard. So we have a problem here where she is devoting a lot of time and energy to what she considers to be investigating this and researching these beliefs, and it's not at all. This is not valid investigation. So someone has her convinced that she has good reason, but then when she gets to the end of it, she says, I don't care if I have good reasons or not, right? I don't care.
I just believe it.
Yeah. So it's just kind of interesting, and I kind of wanted to show those clips. I found it personally kind of interesting in light of what I'm going to be talking about this coming weekend, and I thought that there might be some people who had some views on indoctrination. A lot of people that have or have not been indoctrinated have thoughts about it, and I just wanted to kind of give a demonstration of what that can do to a person, how they appear versus somebody who has the same theistic beliefs but does not give the appearance of indoctrination.
Sure. I really enjoyed Dom actually looking at his own belief system, saying like, why do you believe? Well, it's faith. But it looked like he was just like really, and thought like you say, he seems so authentic. And at first I was looking, I was like, this seems interesting. But he's just very, very open to like the challenge, like that, especially when he was talking about challenging. That it's okay to challenge the Bible and the God, and I'm just like, wow, that's something that I would not get when I was growing up. That it's okay to do that. I'm kind of curious now as to how his experience, like how it was brought up, like what was his church.
Well, he says he was raised Baptist. It's not in this clip, but earlier in the video, he mentions that he was raised Baptist. And one of the things that I liked about Dominic was when he said a lot of people believe it. And before the host could even get the explanation out, Dominic's already laughing and he says, I know. Right. That's not it. You can tell he's heard that before. Like he understands that, a lot of people believing it does not support it.
And was honest about it. And was honest
enough
to
himself,
actually admit. To say that's bad. Yeah. It sounds.
And to be fair, Tia laughed at herself too. I mean, she was laughing as well. She had a pretty good attitude about it, but she was just not confident enough to think for herself. And it's very sad to see that kind of restricted, a person being destroyed like that, an identity being destroyed like that. You know, someone being told how to think, what to say, to the point that they can't even give an opinion.
Yeah, and that same type of thing, like when you're originally talking about when you're at a young age being told that you are wrong, going back to the shame that you were talking about earlier, that it's a lot more difficult to do that to someone once they've already built up this identity on their own through their experiences, through the life, through everything that they've known over time. But talking about if someone is very young, like they're 4, 5, 6, whatever, and they notice that they have, say, a same-sex attraction,
right,
and they bring that up to their parents or someone in their church life or something like that, and they're told over and over that, you know, it's sinful, it's wrong, this is not what God wants you to be.
Right.
Like you're doing something that is against God's wishes. You're going against the word, and you need to snap out of it. Otherwise, you know, you'll burn in hell, something like that. And that, like internalizing that message onto yourself. The
child will still experience it, but they will label it and categorize it as a very bad, wicked thing that they need to fight against and ignore. And, you know, I need to not do these things.
Right.
And I need to not think these things. And
when they do have a thought or something that, you know, goes into that strata, they roll back to that same identity that was pounded into them, that this is wrong. And like depression, and there's so much other... there's so much that can come
it really is
with
huge.
that. And but if you grew up in a more liberal household and you learned about sexual identities, and then you find out, I happen to be one of these, and I identify as gay. If someone tries to say that, like someone coming to me and saying, "Oh no, that's totally wrong. It's terrible. It's against God," which is like I don't have that indoctrination sitting there saying that that this is so bad. I can fight against that because I've looked at it a little more thoroughly in my experience growing up, doing research on it, trying to find out what is this that I am. I don't have a word for this. Let me see what this is. And once I found, hey, this is my identity, that I'm gay, I identify as this.
Right.
I'm not the only one. It's not abnormal. This is a part of, seems to be a part of life.
And that's the thing. And this is how a belief should work, right?
Right.
This is something that you had a belief about it, you know, that you were taught, and then you went in and you investigated it and came to your own beliefs about who you are and how you feel about yourself. And then at the end of the day, if I ask you to explain those beliefs to me, you're not going to go to a website.
No.
Even though you found information when you were looking into it and you were researching it, at the end of the day, you develop these beliefs for reasons that you understand.
Right.
And when I ask you about it, you're going to say, this is why I'm okay with it. You don't have to refer back. And it's not because you memorized what's on a website.
No, it's just doing that research, just internalizing all of that. That's now I'm better equipped to explain the position and the way I am versus...
And that's what gives you the confidence.
Sure.
Not because you have it memorized. That's the thing that I just wish... you know, people would understand. And, you know, this is just a little bit of what goes into when people say, how can people believe these things? This is how people believe these things. How can a person be gay and be a Christian? This is how a person can be gay and be a Christian. This is how people deal with it. And yes, that when you're talking about a more liberal upbringing, the authoritarian upbringing is the one that causes most of the issues. That's what, if you're researching it, that's what you're going to research is authoritarian, child rearing. Okay, so that's kind of that. I just wanted to get that out there.